Right. Social and community risks. Actually, I mostly just wanted to sort of open up a quick conversation with you. It's getting late in the evening, so I thought, well, let's just keep it fairly steady. I'll just go through these quick points very simply, just to introduce the global context, a bit about some of the other factors that are sort of impacting social and community and political risks that I've been facing and that I've been experiencing, and we've been helping our clients to work through. And then I'll conclude with a bit of an overview about how we've been recommending approaches to that. First one is a simple one on population. By 2050, a long ways out perhaps, but we expect like quite a more significant shift in the world population to about 9 billion. In Russia, of course, that'll be, it's a negative population flow, similarly in most of Europe. But in the UK, it's increasing, as it is in Central Asia. Central Asia being, in this case, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan. Each of these areas, of course, with an increasingly urbanized population. This, of course, puts a different spin on the types of materials and metals that are demanded by this population, and that will have an impact, of course, on all the things that will be sort of mining from around. The second factor that's impacting social, political, and community risks is as we think about it, moving ahead into the future, is a low carbon future. We believe that the Paris Agreement is coming online. That's now fairly clear, apart from America, maybe, and it's bringing with it in tow a number of different sort of sets of assumptions. Primarily one that's coming through the media, where the idea of a low carbon economy also includes a lower strain on natural resource extraction along with it. Now, of course, that's not at all true, and I came across recently an excellent article in Nature this summer where the point was made very stark. It was we just cannot tackle climate change, and of course we just heard from my colleagues earlier about lithium and other materials such as that, which will be producing batteries to contribute to the low carbon future. And we just saw exactly how that demand is increasing. I think the third thing, just to sort of put up there as a discussion point, is digital transformation, whether we're talking about automation and technologies, whether we're talking about 3D printing, drones, the use of big data in whatever form you define that for your operations, or even, from my perspective, engaging with social tools widely available on the net now to help us sort of keep close contacts with stakeholders. These are all becoming mainstream strategies for mining companies, and certainly a big part of where people are expecting benefits. So right now we've got an idea of an increasing demand for metals and minerals as a result of the low carbon economy, and digital transformation, which is expected to bring with it a good deal of value. The data for this slide was something that I culled from World Economic Forum report published earlier this year. 450 billion of additional value to the industry over the next 10 years, a reduction of CO2, and over 1,000 lives saved, and 44,000 injuries avoided. Quite how the WEF and Arthur Andersen, Accenture came up with that, I'm not entirely clear, but these are great things to consider. Who wouldn't want to save 1,000 lives and make $425 billion in value? But it does come at a cost. And for me, this is the cost that I think about, which is another statistic that it came out with, which is that this potential comes with a projected loss of significant workforce, nearly 5% of the global mining workforce. Where that impacts me, and for the purpose of our discussions here with respect to social and political and community risk, is that the workforce that will be impacted is the workforce that you would normally engage locally. These are the lower skilled jobs, not the higher skilled science-based technical jobs, of course. These would be the jobs that you would normally push out there as part of the package to acquire the social license, which we've been hearing about earlier. This particular data set, 2012, 2013, comes from ICMM. But we can really see from it, one of the reasons why I like it and I find it very instructive is because the data is coming to us since 2002, they've collected it on. And we see a clear increase in the number of incidents with respect to mining community and conflict that has been reported. Again, increased demand, increased desire for a low carbon future, lower jobs as a result of it, and we're already experiencing this rather dramatic change in mining company community conflict. When we think about that from a different perspective, again, this data set is coming, you kind of want to check these data sets out, you don't want to just take one. So we check them out again. This is a different data set that was being generated from a Factiva media analysis. Of course, many of you will know Factiva as a broad-based media service. And look, since 2012, this data set was 2012-2015, an increase in incidents of conflict by 66%, an increase in the number of companies impacted by 72%, an increase in the number of countries affected by 66%. And all of this is to say that nobody is immune. We would normally think of in the past, well, gold mining, okay, they've got some particular issues, but really, this is affecting everything. In the data, what we see is that there's no specific commodity that is restricted to, or that sort of generates conflict, particularly more than others necessarily. Nor are we seeing conflict limited to the developing world. Okay, in fact, here we are talking about Central Asia, Eurasia. Greece, Romania have recently, somebody was talking about Romania earlier. Romania was, of course, Gabriel Resources. That was quite well documented. Canada, Australia have also experienced, an increase in mining company community conflict. Jane was talking earlier about water conflict and how water, very important as it is for the mining process, has been contributing to company community tension. That's absolutely correct. In the same time period, what we've seen from the data is an increase through the constant of these increases. Now, one of the biggest contributing causes is water at 15% of the total. Land use is the biggest one. Beneficiation is big as well, and the environment. Interesting for me is that the other category is actually at 8%. It's very ill-defined by the researcher, but this seems to be sort of increasing. This is more about specific benefits related to that could be transferred to local communities in very unique jurisdictions. But it's not all about big conflicts and protests. What we're talking about when we think about, what I'm talking about when we think about community and social and political conflict is the everyday conflicts that go on as well. The community disruptions that may only last 24, 48 hours, but they take a significant amount of time away from mine site management. 24 to 48 hours, 2-3 days, a couple times a quarter, this starts to mount up and this starts to add to cost. Now, there have been different attempts to quantify these costs, some coming from Daniel Franks in a great paper, others coming from Vit Henish, who has published some great work on this as well, Vit coming from the Wharton School. So a number of academics, both in Australia and the US at Harvard and Wharton, have been sort of contributing to our understanding of the impacts of these types of risks and these types of issues and incidents. What we all agree on is that, look at non-technical risks defined in this way as social, political, and community risks, so roughly account for 50% of all project risks and 73% of all project delays, and they do form, whilst we can't exactly agree on the the figures of costs. Jane had one with respect to costs of water for 100 million, I think, in your example, in Brazil. I mean, these are phenomenal figures. They do mount up, and they are becoming increasingly significant. And see, add to this the fact that as an industry, dealing with these challenges is not the easiest thing. And it's not the easiest thing because as an industry, well, you're better than tobacco, we're better than oil, but not quite as good as IT, and phenomenally not even as good as pharmaceuticals. There's a lot of work to be done. It's not impossible, and that's despite the amount of effort that that mining sector has put in over the last, say, 5 to 10 years to improve its efforts with respect to making better community relations, understanding these risks better. Still, however, cast your thoughts back to the presentation we just had on FAME. That level of technical detail, going into understanding the resource, rarely, let's face it, rarely gets put into understanding the social, political, and community risks which are having an increasing impact and cost. There is a way forward, and for me, and what we've experienced as we've started to work in South America, in East Africa, in Asia, and in Central Asia, is to engage openly, to engage transparently, to apply data of all kinds, to listen and to work your hardest to inspire that trust through these actions. A focus group isn't going to do it. A couple of different types of activities is better than, look, I mean, the best sort of analogy that I can provide is, the social equivalent of prospecting. I would encourage you to sort of, think more deeply about how we can apply big data techniques to your analysis and understanding of these problems, which can, cause you delay, cost you and your shareholders money, and of course, interrupt, aspects of the global supply chain, which has got increasing demand. The way that we do it is a sort of a three-part way, and it's very simple. We spend a lot of time understanding the system. Again, I'm an anthropologist, so I'm used to sort of getting out there, and this is where I approach the problem from. Everything starts right from the beginning. So from my perspective, I blend in the big data with the ethnography to help us to develop a very rich, detailed, and nuanced understanding of these local social structures, and we develop an integrated an idea of the network layers. I describe them from my perspective as network layers. Jane was describing them just earlier as the different levels of influence, whether it was from the locality, the catchment area, the region, the nation, or internationally from the NGOs. We see it. We use different words to describe the same phenomenon. So we're looking at it from a perspective as an anthropologist. I look at it from a perspective of integrated layers. And we understand those integrated layers within the context of the system as a whole. If you fail to understand the system as a whole, you fail to be able to grasp how its various components fit together, and therefore will never be able to communicate with that system in the way that you'd want in order to generate the trust that you need. Just like everything else, people are, in this moment now, we know what it was like, 10 years ago, before Facebook and before, rapid SMSs and instant messaging. Emails was where it was at. Before that, it was faxes. I can remember sending faxes. I mean, look, we've moved on in our communications so swiftly, and it's not just your shareholders and your colleagues who are expecting a more rapid transfer of information and a more collaborative information sharing environment. It's also the people in the communities in which you're working, even if they're not even connected to the internet. For example, area recently working in for about 2 years or so in Colombia, 27% of the population was up online, but everyone had a phone, everyone was connected, whether it was a brick phone or a feature phone, they were connected in. Now, what we did with that was to develop a kind of a retro digital system, if you will. Internet 0.5 as opposed to 5.0. We took the basic SMS system and we developed, we invested basically in the development of a social messaging application that allows us to engage the population in real time, through any device which they already own. They don't require a smartphone to have WhatsApp, although many of them do. But we found this to be really interesting, actually, and it started to generate some phenomenal results. We grafted this system to the social structure as it exists, so that we were including every group that was able to come up as our, through our understanding of the system, rather than, just put the technology on the top and hope that people adopt it or join it. And rather than just sort of talking at people, we gave them the ability to message for themselves, and again, creating a different type of space, but using a very basic technology that they already have. Using the Colombian example for, just to give you an idea of the type of impact that this had, within 5 months of establishing the platform in rural Colombia, 60% of the population over 16 was signed up and using the platform. That is a very fast adoption rate. Of course, very quickly that got the attention of the local government. The local government started to ask the mining company, can we use the system that you're sponsoring in order to reach our constituents? Of course, the mining company thought this was fantastic because, again, they're looking now to local government for increased speed for their permitting processes, their regulatory issues, resolving their local taxation issues, helping them to work together in a true partnership. Mining company now had something that local government and politicians actually valued beyond the brown envelope, which was the ability to help them engage more effectively in real time with their own constituents, something that they didn't have. So this was really important. We measured it over the course of these 5 months and noted that here we were working with an international mining company coming for the first time into a fresh jurisdiction, and like I say, within less than 6 months, trust between the company and the community actually improved measurably by 40%. And this was fantastic. Now, before you ask, because I know that I get this question a lot in terms of how do we measure trust, we use an amalgam. It's very difficult to measure trust. It's not perfect, but you've got to start somewhere. You've got to start sort of thinking about how do we measure this. For us, it's about measuring trust behavior as opposed to, yes, I trust you. So we look at different types of behaviors. It's actually a good point in terms of how data is collected as well. I mean, when I see it a lot, and it's kind of like, people sort of like, you can't, it's very difficult sort of like, go up to somebody and, what's your name, and how old are you, and what school do you go? When you're administering a survey, you've really got to take care with that. And I know, again, in the rush to, to sort of achieve the social metrics that mining companies are increasingly being asked to achieve, this is being used as a box-ticking exercise. And I know that, many of you probably, tune in to the channel Raw Talks from now and again. They've had a couple of really good sessions on there, where it's been, look, please don't do the box-ticking exercise. Avoid it if you can. Try and do real work. It's always better for you. The third aspect of what we do looks at taking this information, listening to this information, analyzing the data that we get, and feeding that into an idea of forecasting for social and political risks. We use this on a number of different occasions, but one example was spectacular. There was an artisan, or I suppose a legal miner operating on the client's concession. We were notified that they had found some valuable production, and very quickly, as with artisanal miners, as we all know, the news spreads like wildfire. We actually were able to track the speed with which that news, because we were watching it, we were watching the phone calls and coming in. We were actually able to sort of in terms of what people were reporting to us. And it was 20 minutes to get for the news to spread to the immediate community. Within 20 minutes, people in the immediate community knew about it. Within 2.5 hours, people within a 50-kilometer radius, understood that there was production, and so people were coming in. But 400, 500 people came to the mine. And what had happened with that, though, our ability to sort of understand that this event was occurring very quickly, allowed us to pass that information on to the mine management. Mine management were able to make some very sensible decisions, communicating with the local police. And instead of this becoming, potentially a very dangerous scenario where private security would get involved, and as has happened in that particular area, lives would be lost over the desire to protect the security of the concession, the local police came in and were able to sort of turn the situation into basically as a local health and safety issue. Interestingly enough, and I think this is what I'll leave you with now, is this comes from again, the WEF and Essentia paper from earlier this year, business as usual in terms of integrated platforms is the personalized communication. That we've got push communication for fast followers into digitization, and lo and behold, I was really pleasantly surprised to see this real-time information on an enterprise level, community engagement with digital platforms, and media listening, at which is both transparent and open and engaged. This is what WEF is imagining for 5 years' time, but we're already in a position now to be delivering it, or sort of like covering off on it. But I guess in closing, though, I don't think you can actually give up on any of those things. You need the personal. We need the focus groups that have been going in there. We need the big data. We need all the information in the same way that you wouldn't pass up on any data when you are evaluating the value of an ore body itself. The social and human resource and the political capital that gets expended within the systems of which you're working is of tremendous value to your project. And I would encourage you to consider it as such. Thank you very much for your time.